I would like to welcome everybody to this episode of Truth Talks, Hispanic Heritage Month in Education and Labor. My name is Brandon Mendoza, and I am very privileged to do an interview with our AFT Vice President, Evelyn De Jesus. I am a current educator in Fayetteville Manlius Schools and proud member of Fayetteville Manlius Teachers Association. I am also the first class graduate of NYSET's BIPOC Pathways to Leadership program, which was absolutely transformational. But before we get started, I would like to begin with our land acknowledgement. Land and people acknowledgement. We begin by acknowledging that we meet on the traditional lands served by the first people. We honor America's indigenous people, their history, their culture, and their stewardship of this land since time immemorial. We learn from all elders, past, present, and emerging. We are called to uncover and share the truths of tribal histories and contributions that have been silenced and suppressed in the telling of America. As we reflect on this truth, we also recognize that the story of this nation is deeply tied to struggle and survival. Alongside Native nations, the shaping of America has also been marked by the experiences of those brought here against their will and those who arrived seeking refuge or opportunity. Both forced and willing immigrants face systems of exclusion, violence, and exploitation. Yet through resilience and contribution, they helped weave the fabric of this nation. We lift these stories not to conflate them, but to see them as threads in a shared tapestry of resilience, threads woven alongside the enduring presence and sovereignty of Native nations. We invite you to think about the space that you inhabit, the struggles and contributions of those who came before, and your role in honoring and carrying forward a more just and truthful story of America. First, it is also my pleasure and privilege to introduce our Secretary-Treasurer and Chair of the Civil and Human Rights Committee and LGBTQ+ Committee, my brother, Philippe Abram.
Thank you, Brendan, and thank everyone for joining us today as we commemorate Hispanic Heritage Month. This is a moment to honor the histories, cultures, and countless contributions of Hispanic communities, not only to our society as a whole, but also to the labor movement and to public education. As Secretary-Treasurer, I want to take this time during Hispanic Heritage Month to recognize the significant impact Hispanic and Latino workers have had on the American labor movement. From organizing strikes to demanding fair wages and humane working conditions, Hispanic labor leaders and workers have played a central role in advancing labor rights across the country. Today, Hispanic workers continue to be a driving force in key industries and are often at the forefront of labor organizing efforts. Celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month in the labor movement not only honors past achievements, but also highlights the ongoing struggles and leadership of Hispanic communities in the fight for workplace justice. Let this conversation remind us of the resilience, leadership, and enduring impact of Hispanic workers in shaping a more just and equitable workforce. Hispanic community members have had a profound and growing impact on the field of education in the United States. As teachers, administrators, support staff, and advocates, they help shape more inclusive, culturally responsive learning environments for an increasingly diverse student population. Hispanic educators serve as vital role models, particularly for Latino students, helping to close achievement gaps and increase graduation rates. Beyond the school walls, Hispanic leaders and communities have long fought for educational equity, bilingual education, and access to higher education for all students, regardless of immigration status or socioeconomic background. Their contributions continue to strengthen the education system and push it toward greater fairness and representation. Once again, thank you for being here today and for committing to the work of learning, understanding, and co-conspiratorship. Together, we are weaving our many threads. Let's continue to build a labor movement and an education system that values every voice and leaves no one behind. With that, I'm going to pass it back to my brother, Brendan. Brendan, take it away.
Thank you, Philippe. I'd like to now introduce our guest speaker. We are honored to have Evelyn de Jesus as our guest this evening. Since 2019, Evelyn de Jesus has been the executive vice president of the 1.8 million member AFT, the first Latina officer in the union's 109 history. A skilled teacher and administrator, de Jesus is a forceful advocate for justice, undaunted and unafraid to speak truth to power. Elected as an AFT vice president in 2014, she co-chairs the AFT Latino Issues Task Force and serves as the presiding officer of the AFT Asian American and Pacific Islander Task Force, the AFT LGBTQIA+ Task Force, and the AFT Native American and Indigenous Task Force. A native Puerto Riqueña Boricua who grew up in New York City's Lower East Side, de Jesus traveled an unexpected road from engaged parent to educator and trade unionist. When one of her daughters became ill during a school construction project, de Jesus publicly exposed the toxic environment caused by asbestos. Her courageous whistleblowing actions led to the Great Asbestos Scandal of 1993 and a citywide shutdown of the schools until asbestos could be safely removed from our school buildings. It's my privilege again to introduce Evelyn de Jesus. Evelyn, I would like to start off our conversation talking a little bit about the contributions and the barriers that Latinos in education face. In your view, what are the most significant barriers that Latino educators face in advancing their careers? And how is the AFT working to overcome such challenges?
Well, thank you, hermano Brandon. First of all, I want to thank you for having me on Truth Talks for my very own state-fed New York State United Teachers. Very exciting, very orgullosa, and thank you. Next, let me first address the contributions that Latinos have made to the struggle for inclusiveness and equitable public education. For reasons I still don't understand, the groundbreaking role Latino parents and students played in school desegregation is not well known and at all. But I don't know if you remember, but Mendez versus Westminster, decided in 1947 by the Ninth Circuit of Appeals, led directly to statewide school desegregation in California, 7 years before the much better known case of Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. So 7 years later, Latinos were there in 1947, had that first case, and 1954 was the big Brown versus Board of Ed. Says a lot in that in of itself. In fact, you could agree that Mendez versus Westminster had a far more immediate impact than Brown, since just 2 months after the decision, then Governor Earl Warren, later Chief Justice Earl Warren, signed a bill ending school segregation in California, making it the very first state to do so. As long as there have been Latino educators, there have been pioneering bilingual and multicultural education programs that enrich classrooms nationwide. And finally, Latinos are now among the fastest growing segments of the U.S. teaching workforce, serving as role models, just like yourself, for millions of Latino students. So when we talk about barriers, at the same time, Brandon, Latino students remain concentrated de facto segregated in underfunded schools with fewer resources than schools with mostly white students. I would be lying if I didn't say that many students still face stigma for speaking Spanish or being English language learners like myself. And above all, in this current movement, the fear of deportation, immigration raids, and aggressive ICE enforcement it destabilizes classrooms as well as neighborhoods and our communities. Children of undocumented parents are suffering outrageously amounts of stress. If there were any, if there were ever a barrier to classroom learning, fear that their parents are going to be disappeared, as we call it, during the school day or when they are at work. That's it. And also, in many states, and I travel over the nation. In Florida, for instance, we had a parent group talk to us and said, Mr. Jesus, we have kindergarten kids with evacuation plans in their backpacks. We're talking 5 and 6 year olds. We're talking children that come into a classroom and look where the window is, just in case if ice comes and they have to run out the window at that point. What kind of fear, what kind of how can you learn and be socially emotionally integrated in classroom learning when you have to deal with these extra, fears and uncertainties and depression and fear in a way that you and I probably, even though we grew up in different ways, but never feel like this, that we're just disappearing, or my parents are not gonna be home when we get home.
I mean, I also have firsthand experience during this crisis and, really difficult time in our nation's history. I personally printed cards for my Latino students for, again, a protocol or something that the school would do to protect them in the case of ICE unexpectedly taking a family member. That created a great deal of anxiety, not just for children, but for their entire families as a whole. It impacted their attendance, and if they are not there, they cannot learn. They would also really not engage in community activities as previously. They are very afraid of being out in public spaces and a barrage of vans showing up to literally kidnap citizens. So I appreciate the work that you're doing and your personal experiences. And you are right, we did not have to grow up under this, this level of fear that these babies are experiencing in school. And a big part of my job as an educator, especially in teacher of ELs, is to relieve some of that fear and make them know for sure that there are people who will come to their aid should bad things happen.
And also teachers. How many teachers, you think about yourself, about myself. If I'm in a school and ICE comes into my classroom, what is going to be my reaction? What is the protocol in the schools? In some states, they're letting ICE go in others, they're not. Are you willing to go to jail? Are you willing to stand up? All that angst and anxiety for our educators, for our members in hospitals. We have nurses all over. So thinking about there's no really safe environment. We hope they will be. They say it will be, but we've seen other places in Chicago where that has not been the case, regardless if they're looking for a parent, whatever. When ICE comes into the building, regardless of who they're looking for and why they're there, the minute they see them, it just brings fear in a way that we can't even describe nowadays. And
I really think that, ICE is a irrelevant department,
correct.
considering we have so many resources already at hand in order to appropriately and in a humanistic way help people through the immigration process. And a lot of innocent people are being caught up in racial profiling, especially, Boricuas, because these raids are literally looking at accents, skin color, and making broad generalizations on who people are and where they are coming from. here in Central New York, we have unfortunately had several raids on farming industry, on a very old and family-owned business that had predominantly immigrant labor who sponsored them through all of the correct ways. And ICE showed up and told everybody to get outside, and also falsely arrested people who were rightly American citizens. So even this problem is, and the language is focused on immigration and immigrants from all over the world. I think that, Americans really should consider that their rights are being trampled on, even if right now it doesn't feel like it. Before they came for us, they will eventually come for you. So I really think that this is a time that we should take that "don't tread on me" flag and really look into what that means, because I think we can all rally around the fact that the government is overstepping its bounds and inflicting great damage to our nation's people, but especially Latinos.
I agree. I totally agree. And the labor movement, especially our union, AFT, we're doing citizenship clinics all over, because in some states you have millions of people that are legal residents for many years. And before, we had lines going out, going around the corner, and we were pro bono legal, free legal, and we would do rallies and do give out books and stuff, and give out backpacks. People are even afraid to come out to do the right thing. So what are we doing in America right now? We're instilling fear, division, uncertainty. And as you well know, many people, also immigrants, come from all our different countries that have authoritarianism and tyranny. And we should also listen to them, because they've been living under that regime, and they came here to breathe, came here for the American dream, like all our parents, abuelas and abuelos. So we really got to look, and we can no longer be spectators in this parade. We have to be participants. We have to.
And I think it's so wonderful that leaders like yourself are setting the expectation for many people. Your energy will trickle down to members, and it really energizes a lot of us. And, especially going through the BIPOC Pathways to Leadership program, NYSET gave me so many new tools and skills to collectively bring people together and not foster division. And I am fortunate enough that even through my role as an educator, I am able to have really productive and restorative conversations with my colleagues who might very, very much believe things differently than I do. But one thing that we can all agree on is that children should not be harmed in no shape, way, or form through this process.
And Brendan, I just want to congratulate you and congratulate NYSET, because labor is not always all on board either. Back in the day, that was not the case. When you and I never used to be felt that I was seen or had voice. So to hear you speak of this great program and a graduate of that program, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of NYSET with, how they've, Melinda and the president, and my brother Felipe and Jamie and Ron, all the leaders, the positions they've taken, how they're bringing equity, inclusion, diversity, leadership. That is something to be very proud of. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. I am very proud to have been part of that cohort, and that cohort of people are absolutely beautiful, and I will make sure that we all stay connected, hopefully for the rest of our lives, because the energy that we collectively fostered is really what we need to bring about change. And not to change the tone away from something quite somber, I'd like to transition to the triumphs of members, and what things future leaders can really do. So if you could tell me, what skills and qualities do you believe that future education leaders should develop to effectively address, many of the things that we have talked about, and especially the barriers faced by Latino students and communities?
Thank you, Brian. Great question. So I believe all of us have a tendency to think that we are the only folks who have faced hard times, right? And powerful opposition. People think that Rosa Parks, when we go and think of history, Rosa Parks, for instance, just sat down on a Montgomery bus one afternoon because she was tired after shopping during the Christmas season. Nothing could be farther from the truth. She was secretary of the local NAACP for 10 years. By then, had spent the previous summers at the multiracial Highlander Institute, where she studied nonviolent organizing tactics, and the Black community in Montgomery had been preparing for a bus boycott for years. In the same way, the expansion of bilingual education, labor protections, and immigrant workers' rights came through decades of Latino organizing. Similarly, Latinos have real cultural power in this country. Latino voices in education and labor, as well as in sports, movies, music, Mark Anthony, Jennifer Lopez, Bad Bunny,
Bad Bunny.
Bad Bunny, and the arts, Roberto Clemente, and the arts have shaped US culture, policy, and identity. Wherever Latinos work, whether it's classrooms, hospitals, or public services, it strengthens the entire labor union. And finally, and most hopefully, today we were in a workshop and we found out that Latinos have a gross spending of $6.2 billion a year. That is power. That is spending power. That's economic power. So hopefully all of us, Latino students and young activists like the Dreamers, and we forget to talk about the Dreamers, are leading today's fights, are leading today's economy for immigrant rights, climate justice, and equitable education.
Thank you. Another just kind of follow-up question for our viewers. What actionable steps can future leaders take today to promote change and initiative that directly target these challenges faced by the Latino community? What kind of bullet points could I go back to school with tomorrow and say, this is now part of my plan to target this particular problem and really make some meaningful change?
So when I think about, we talked about what resistance means. I think when I grew up, and I say this just to clarify some things. This generation loves labor. This generation wants to do something. They're about the economy. I mean, they're about the environment. They're about communal. They're about equity in so many ways. When I grew up with nothing, and we had to build. My mom, came from Puerto Rico. My father was a factory worker. She was a social worker. And we built and we learned how to work and contribute to the family. This generation is very different. I look at my grandkids, I look at my daughters, and I find that how it is. We gave them what we couldn't have. That's what, yo me crié con nada. I want to give them this. And not just Latino family, all families. So I think this generation has to be reflective, first of all, because they have it and now it's being taken away. Very different when you don't have it and you build. So in the psychological realm and in the emotional realm, we have to think about that, right? Then we have to think about, you can't do everything, but what's one thing you can do, right? And then we have to think about, where am I in this universe and where am I as a human being? As you said, you've learned so much. Labor has given a lot of tools. We in our union, in your union, and all the unions, we have know your rights. We have what to do. We have a lot of training. So I would say community building is number one. I would say, connecting yourself with others that are like-minded like you. And also say, what am I willing to do? Am I going to tie myself to a bridge and let them take me away? They're activists that are willing to do that, and we see them on TV all the time. But then, like we talked about, there are activists that want to just vote or want to do an email to a legislator or want to partake in, packing up water because it's going to be a rally the next day, or making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for lunch for the people that are participating. So as we define resistance, as we define where we are and what we're willing to do, And I would say to this new generation of activists, of laborers, of unionists, we have to be like that poem that everybody talks about. When they came for the Jews, I said nothing. When they
Yeah.
came for the blacks, I said nothing. When they came for the gay, I said nothing. Now they came for me, and there was no one there to protect me or say something for me. So where are you in that poem? Where are you in the stages of resilience and resistance? So, and our narrative, people say, oh, the illegals. I detest that. Undocumented. So we have to also think about uniting labor. We have to think about educating sectors. We have to think about how we educate our people. What does this mean? And how do we meet people where they are? Because we cannot impose what we want. We could say, this is what we offer. What are you willing to do? I believe that this generation will change the world. I believe in humanity, and I believe that whoever voted for whoever, they didn't vote for this. This is not what people voted for. And I
No.
believe that people are, they call us the wokes. I believe they're waking up to what their reality is. The farmers, they have no immigrants to farm. Construction, La Una, all these construction laborers, they have none. Educators, right now we have such a shortage of nurses, of teachers all over. Military, there's a shortage of people getting into the military. So there's a shortage of everything. They're deporting and disappearing our people. And where are we? So people need to accept the fact that where are you and how are you as a fighter, and what are you willing to do, and meet them where they're at. You and I could be radicals and be out there and do what we do and not be afraid, but others are not at that point. How do we engage them? How do we make these schools safe and enjoyable environments, these hospitals, these churches, where people go for refuge and they don't have to work? So thinking about narrative, thinking about coming together as a community, thinking about where am I in this community, and what is your meaning of resistance, what is your meaning of participation, and where do we go from here? Because I believe when we fight, we win.
I completely agree. And to share something personally happening in my community, which I feel is a form of resistance. I work in Fayetteville Manlius, which is a blue ribbon school district, and really doesn't have many of the same challenges as neighboring districts. It's very affluent, and the immigrants that join the community, particularly are professionals coming from Asian countries, but we still have children from all over the world. But what is different in my experience, where I have taught in predominantly Title I schools, this is my first experience working in a school where I didn't have to beg for resources. And there was a mindset of abundance instead of a mindset of, scarcity. And I think that environment being cultivated is a form of resistance. And the district proudly displays diversity, equity, inclusion language and policies on their district website when that type of action is literally being punished. They have stood up to that. And there was a comprehensive look at the district's curriculum and how can they make affluent children who may not understand poverty at all. How can we create empathy for people of different experiences? And that comprehensive review of curriculum has led to many wonderful books that I have the privilege to teach kids, with beautiful stories, and a lot of stories that I can see myself in. So I know that my students also probably see themselves in. So many of these challenges kind of don't just impact, Latinos in the labor movement. It impacts the labor movement as a whole. Some of the issues that we are facing as a labor movement is political opposition and legislation, funding and resource constraints, public perception and support, recruitment and membership decline, and workplace and policy changes. I think it's important for leaders to foster the skills to build resilience amongst many of these challenges. What are some forms of resilience that you encourage your members to have, especially during this challenging time?
When I think about resilience, I think about grit, I think about courage, I think about how do we bring that into place? I believe that I'm thinking out loud kind of because I was thinking about this question and I want to be as authentic as possible. I'm thinking about we don't know what we have inside. Like you're a perfect example as I spoke to you. You went into this in the NICEP program and you said I have all these tools. As you speak to me, I'm seeing the resilience that I see in you, that now you're empowered. You have the tools to do what you want to do. And you feel that now that empathy that has grown into your heart, into your soul, into your spirit, I feel it. I could feel it through this interview that we're doing. How do we get your question is, how do we get that to the masses?
Yes.
And so what we do is we have labor come in. We start these programs, exactly what NICET is doing and AFT is doing, and many of our other labor unions, and we educate our people and what it means. We don't have to agree with everything. Again, we have 1.8 million members. Not everybody's on board. We have Democrats, we have Republicans, we have independents, we have Christians, we have atheists. Everyone's at a different place. But how do we build that we can all come together, throw away, eat the meat, bring it to the middle and throw away the bones? How do we build that collaborative, strategic solidarity that we can bring? Then once we can do that with training, with open dialogues, with safe environments, as you said, to talk and be able to say what we feel. Because again, people don't even talk to each other nowadays. The whole AI, the whole texting, we don't even, people don't know
People
how to
don't know their
court.
neighbors.
Yeah, people don't talk. We don't talk about, yo no voy a hablar de eso because eso es político. Like, we don't want to talk about that because that's politics. And I don't want, in churches,
Yep.
people are not talking. I'm a Christian woman. My church, has very different views than me. But I take what I know and I take what I believe, and I don't have to agree with everything, but I know what I know. So the resilience would be that we come together, we have the empathy that we need, and we bring the tools in labor and community, and we educate our people, because a lot of it is misinformation, disinformation, and no information. And I think that has gotten us to a place that people leave everything on TikTok, they believe everything on, Instagram. And the resilience has to be that I know the truth. If we don't learn our history and we don't learn I think of Cesar Chavez when he started this fight. And I remember he said, no se puede. And Dolores Huerta says, what's the famous quote? Sí se puede.
Sí,
When
sí.
farm workers in the 50s and 60s fought again for rights, for being able to use the bathroom when they're in the field, and having a dignified workplace and a dignified voice. We got to get back to that resilience. We got to get back to the struggle. The struggle is here. It's not a fight. It's not a battle. It's a war. So where are we in this war, and how do we keep keeping each other safe? Because that's a whole, you talked about racial profiling. I was racial profiling in the airport 2 weeks ago. I was scared, and I'm a pretty tough cookie. So resilience will be, you take care of me, I take care of you. Build these safe environments, build these environments that we can talk honestly and really come for a conclusion and a strategy that we could all live with, and not always agree with everything, but be comfortable with what we believe, and making sure that children and our members and our communities are safe.
Thank you. My next question, I want to kind of talk about the resilience and strength a little bit more. I do know that NICET and my local and the skills and tools that I have been given are exactly what you said. They foster unity and solidarity. They engage in strategic advocacy, like the BIPOC program. and prioritizing the well-being of educators through, apps that NYSET offers, and trainings in mindfulness, and staying focused on that educational equity that we want for all children. Another good tenement is they cultivate leadership development, again, the BIPOC program, and we celebrate each other. I really feel that the ultimate form of acceptance is celebration. When you have people who are willing to celebrate you, that's really the ultimate form of acceptance. And different unions and different areas of the country are doing this in different ways. But I think that, again, by meeting people where they are, just like you said, and focusing on the human nature of each other, use each other's first names, support each other, even if you have differences.
Right.
Everybody is considered a monster in your mind until you talk to them. And I really think, since we are not talking to each other, our minds are creating a bigger divide than what actually exists. I really think that we all have much more in common than we
I
really
agree.
do have differences. So overall, we know that immigration enforcement in the United States continues to be complex and an evolving landscape, and it's influenced by political shifts and judicial decisions and societal debates. The question I have is, in what ways can union members build stronger partnerships with Latino communities to ensure that their needs and voices are prioritized in educational reforms and heard in decision-making processes?
Okay, so I think we're doing that now. We're actually doing that now. And a lot of it is exactly what NYSET is doing. Again, I congratulate them. And what AFT is doing, what AFL-CIO, training is a big thing. We are doing resistance training. We're doing also training on how, if we're in a rally and something should happen. We never even thought about first aid. We never thought about there's a shootout in a rally. How do we, the first thing what would you do? Run, right? That's
Yes.
what they say, don't. Go by a wall and stay by a wall. I would never even think of that, So I think education is very important in that, as we said. And how do we even bring labor together? Because NYSET is on board, AFT is on board, but as in the United States, not everybody's on board. Not every labor person is on board. So I think when, as you said, as we come together, realizing that this is all our problem. Immigration is my problem today for Latinos. As you well know, now they're going into Chicago and other, we learned today they're going into Chicago under the auspice of immigration, but now they're talking about crime for Black young folks. So they're coming after the Latinos, now they're coming after the Blacks, and then they're going to come after who? This is a major, major plan. Project 2025, if you've read it, this is all in their playbook.
Yep.
And I really believe, as you said today, people didn't believe this was going to happen. He showed us who he was, and we didn't believe it. We didn't believe it. But moving forward, I believe as things continue to get worse, and people see that this administration, I think they're putting 550 billion, it was 34 billion, I think, for immigration enforcement. But they're cutting Medicaid, they're cutting WIC, they're cutting SNAP, which are all for our children, all milk, supplements, all food stamp supplements. People are hurting, and the more they hurt, it doesn't affect, if it doesn't affect you, this is how it's been. I don't really want to know. I'm empathetic about it, but it's not affecting me. Like you said, you were raised by a single mom. I was raised very poor, and we knew what it was. It's affecting people, and people are seeing that I can't continue to live this way. They can't take this money from me to disappear immigrants, but then I don't have health care benefits. Exactly what's happening in the shutdown. So we have to come together, and we have to know what we want, who we want in the next election. How do we bring the people that are going to represent us and hold them accountable? because that's another thing. We have to hold our politicians accountable like we've never done before. So I think as we come together as a union, unity, solidarity, and also speaking, like you said, talking to each other. When we get into these meetings, we have a civil and human rights conference. We're talking LGBT task force is talking to AAPHI task force. When immigration was done, it was 450 Koreans. People are
Yep.
thinking in Georgia, it was Latinos. It was Koreans and it was people with high ranking, but we showed up. We showed up. So when people talk about immigration, it's not just Latinos. It's Russians, it's Afro-Latino brothers are from Haiti. So it's a us problem, not a me problem or they problem. It's an us problem. So as we talk and we bring people together and we educate and labor comes together, I believe that we're going to win this. And the tide is turning, as you see on the news. The tide is definitely turning because everything is anti, anti, anti. But now I'm part of that anti, and this is a problem for me. And as we get our next generation of laborers, of unionists, of activists, educating them, showing them, giving the tools as nice as it's done to you. Look who you are today. Look where we're at today doing this wonderful podcast.
Yeah, I mean, a year ago, I couldn't even imagine that my life would be like this. I did not envision talking to the vice president of the AFT or working with Philippe and Melinda. You know, this avenue for my life was never anticipated, and I really owe it to the people who have this wonderful self-awareness that they can meet people where they're at, and we can bring people up. May we all rise. And when you said about the new generation, you know, there's Generation Alpha, there's Gen Z. The one thing that I have noticed about our next generation of laborers and, you know, union members is that emotional intelligence. I have conversations with children who wow me on a daily basis on how self-aware they are of their emotions and how it impacts other people. So even if we cannot make the sustainable gains that we want, you know, we can't necessarily win the war because we're winning battles. I think that with just and within a short period of time, we're going to have a next generation that has a large interest in making sure that this country comes through on its promise, that it's made to all of us. And, you know, that we are entitled to the pursuit of happiness and safety. And we live in this country in order to pursue our dreams. So thank you very much for your commentary on that. And I think that your hope is what is most contagious about you, is that I feel much more hopeful and optimistic, which isn't easy to do, even just watching the news for a short period of time. That hope that you are giving to me, I hope that everybody who is watching also feels that level of hope come through and inspire them to many of the actionable ways that we talked about today. My final question to close off our night is probably the most difficult question that I'm going to ask you. How excited are you for Bad Bunny to be highlighting the Super Bowl?
I just want you, I have to tell you, I was in Puerto Rico 2 weeks ago, and I actually was when the concert. I didn't go to the concert, but I went to the party. What do you call that? The party that he had, and I was in El Distrito, right? I just have a funny story because I think it's funny to bring joy in every. And my husband wasn't familiar with Bad Bunny, believe it or not, but my grandkids are. So we go to the Distrito with the president of the teachers union there, which we represent 36,000 members in
Yeah.
Puerto Rico, right? So my husband sees all these young folks, all these like from 13 to like 25, even people my age, And he said, "What is going on?" You know, we couldn't even walk. It was hundreds of people, thousands of people looking at this big screen on Bad Bunny. And I said, "This guy is like the Beatles, like Elvis in our time." I am very excited. I am so proud of him in the sense that who he is as a Puerto Riqueño, how he has taken the economics of it and brought it to the island in a way that nobody would. It was so strategic in such a way that he's brilliant. He's brilliant. And then the way he stands, look, we have buying power. We have economic power. The fact that they put Bad Bunny in the NFL says a lot about who we are as Latinos. We are the second highest voting group. It used to be African American, and today we looked at data and says Latinos are the second now. So think about voting power. Think about shopping, buying power, economic power. So fear on the other side has come. And
Yes.
that's why they're doing what they're doing to us. Let me be very clear. We are gonna be the majority in a couple of years. And they knew that. And what do you think is being done? So, am I excited? I'm established. Estoy orgullosa. Mi corazón está lleno. And I just can't wait to the damn Super Bowl. And everybody in this weekend that we're at the Civic, they're learning Spanish because they want to know. So he challenged us. And before I leave, I just want to give a call to action that I think is important, if I may. I
Yes, of
want to give
course.
a call to action. Because I'm an organizer and I always think I like to give homework and I like to give people things to think about, which is, which I think is important. And I think first, we must defend public education as a right, not a privilege. Every child, regardless of immigration status, deserves access to safe, high quality public education. And the Supreme Court said so in Pila versus Joe, all the way back in 1982. We have to insist that states and municipalities protect workers as yours has in your town, instead of using immigration enforcement to allow them to be exploited. And finally, day in and day out, we have to build real solidarity across borders and across communities. The labor and education movements must lead with compassion, with justice, and with equity and unity. This is this is the joint LACLA and AFT commitment as national president of LACLA. We stand together with workers, we stand together with students, with familias, and with communities, fighting for dignity, dignidad, equity, and justice for all Latinos and all Americans, because we are all brothers and sisters, and an injury to you is an injury to me. Thank you.
Beautifully said. I am very blessed to be part of this Truth Talks podcast and having the privilege of meeting you. I hope I get the privilege very soon to meet you in person. And our next upcoming episode is also something in which Philippe and yourself are also deeply invested in. And our next session will be celebrating LGBTQ plus History Month, which I am also excited for. This and all of the episodes will be located on the Nice at Social Justice webpage under Truth Talks, with links to all resources provided for those that are interested. So to close for our audience, good night and
Buenas
si se
noches.
puede.
Sí se puede. Thank you all.